Okay, let's open in a word of prayer, and we'll see what happens today. So let's pray. Lord, thanks for the day. We pray that you'll bless our time together, and Lord, we pray that you will heal whatever internet and connectivity issues we're having, and pray that everything will work well there. Thank you for your word and your guidance, and pray you'll bless our time together today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, we are in a very rural area, and we're having extreme weather. We must be having. It's like 80 degrees and no wind and a beautiful sunny day, but we seem to be having, I know first hour there were some YouTube interconnectivity issues. So what we do is we always stream live, like the sermon about 9:45, which I did this morning, and then this starting at about 11 o'clock, 11-ish, we call it here. And but we've been having the last couple Sundays, and then again today, we're having some connectivity issues and interrupted internet. But I think I'm hearing a lot of churches are having this issue today. I don't know if it's intentional or what. So if this gets interrupted around 1 o'clock, what is recorded here that we're doing right now live will also be reposted under the videos tab on our YouTube channel and also on Rumble. So anyway, that's the issue. Today we're going to talk about getting late. And usually my updates are a little bit characterized by being disorganized. And I would say that today may be the ultimate epitome of that, because it's like I'll sit down, and I have an office on our lower level, and I go down there. I'll be up at 9 o'clock to get ready for bed. 11:15, Pam's calling me on the phone saying, "Where are you? It's 11:15. Did you fall asleep?" And no, I go from one thing to another, to another, to another. And where I think might be 1 or 2 or 3 slides will be 40, 30, 20 very quickly. And it's really becoming a big problem to keep up with. So if you do write to me and you don't get a response back, don't take that personally. So anyway, getting late, so we have I have my little icons that I use to kind of represent. I kind of build on some of the people have the grand chessboard type thing. And so I've taken these chess pieces that are supposed to represent the flags or other characteristics of different countries. Like you see China there with the dragon on the upper right-hand corner. You see the Qatar symbol. You see the Egyptian chess king. And while I'm thinking about it, so I'm going to be kind of going scatterbrained a little bit today. There's a lot going on with regard to Egypt and its relationship to Israel. I mean, and look, most of the things we talk about have a pivot point around Israel, and also a pivot point around different groups of people that are identified in different prophetic passages. For example, I do think that Psalm 83 has future prophetic relevance and relevance to our period of time. For example, in the Abraham Accords that President Trump has been pushing, it seems right now that almost all of the countries that are coming into, or they want to come into the Abraham Accords, are identified in Psalm chapter 83. And we have this problem, so this will be just sort of a sidebar discussion. So you've been in the courtroom, and the judges go, sidebar, and everybody sees the lawyers go up to the judge's bench, and they stand there, and what do you talk about? So I'm going to reveal to you. A lot of times it's nothing important. I remember one time, big case, judge called us up and I was examining a witness and he goes, Mr. Howler, I'm going to guess that you're not done with this guy before lunch because you've been going 2 hours and you haven't looked at your notepad yet. I said, I'll probably be going all day cross-examining this guy. He goes, well, can we take a break? Because I got to go to the bathroom, So that's the big discussion that happens. Or one time I don't know if I should tell that story because it sounds... Okay, so I'm trying a case up in Mansfield, and there's a lawyer. This guy's we're good friends, and we're on opposite sides of a case, but we get along and everything. But he's disabled. He has he can't use his legs. So he has those crutches that he uses with his arms. And he's been doing this his whole life. And so he looks like, what was it? Arnold Schwarzenegger in the upper body. He could walk across America on his hands doing a handstand. And so I would object to a question that he asked, and he would always say, Judge, can I have a sidebar? Judge says, sure. And this is a judge. I used to sit in his office and talk to him for hours. He's a great guy. And so what did this attorney do? He struggles to get up, and then it's this slow lurch all the way across the courtroom. And judge says, he goes, well, judge says, objection sustained. The next time I do it, judge says, the attorney goes, can I have a sidebar? Same thing, struggling across the courtroom. And I'm like, Judge, we don't need to have a sidebar every time. He goes, if he asks for a sidebar, I'm going to give him one. So you have to determine whether you're going to tick the jury off by making him go across the courtroom every time you make an objection, even if your objection is valid. So that's what happens at sidebars, is not anything. So I want to talk just very briefly about the use of how prophetic scripture should be interpreted. There is within the Bible prophecy community, there's a divergence of opinion. Some people see it like I do, and other people are wrong. Okay? No, so we often talk, and you'll hear this used in some guys' teaching, grammatical, literal, historical, hermeneutic. We look at the grammar, we look at the history, we look at the literal, we want to take something literally. And you will, but then there are those of us who think that the Jewish method of eschatology is the proper way to look at these scriptures. And sometimes, as I've mentioned over and over again, there's a pattern there. Or sometimes the prophecies will apply. For example, many of the Old Testament prophets, they spoke for their current time, they spoke for the first coming of Christ, and they spoke for the second coming of Christ, sometimes all in the same passage. And so it does make it a bit tricky sometimes as to how you're going to apply this. So I'll use this as an example, and this is not to run down people who might hold this view. So there's a question out there, and every time something happens in Syria now, particularly Damascus, everybody starts posting, the destruction of Damascus. Isaiah chapter 17, verse 1. That's happening. That's going to happen. That's imminent. It's going to happen any moment. So they're in the prophecy community, people that I do conferences with, some say Isaiah 17 is a future prophecy. I happen to think it's probably a future prophecy. It's something that's going to happen, but everybody wants to focus just on Isaiah 17, verse 1. And I don't think that's proper. You need to read the whole passage, and you'll find out there's a whole lot of other things, Ephraim and the north of Israel and that type of thing. And so I think it's future. Others say, happened in the past, it's all over and done with. And some will say, well, look, the first 16 chapters of Isaiah, that talked about the relation of Damascus and the kingdom of Aram. They're used interchangeably. So, and Damascus was destroyed, but it says it shall never be a city again, and it's kind of a city now, kind of an important city, and one of the longest existing ones in human history. But to say, well, it didn't really mean Damascus, it meant Aram, because they're talking about the kingdom of Aram. So really the first 16, 17 chapters of Isaiah, that's all fulfilled prophecy, and we don't even need to look at that anymore. I do not agree with that approach. And the reason I don't agree with that approach, and I've heard people say this, the first 16 chapters deal with Aram and Damascus, and it's used interchangeably. The ancient kingdom of Aram, which hasn't existed for a long, long time. So maybe it was Aram that's not going to exist anymore, even though the passage says Damascus. Setting that aside, though, they say, don't worry about the first 16 chapters. But wait a minute. When I open my Bible to Matthew, when it's talking about the birth of Jesus Christ, it talks about the verse in, I think it's Isaiah 8 or 9, behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son. Now, wait a minute. So if you just said all of that is back in the past, then you need to go talk to Matthew about Matthew including a prophecy from the first 16 chapters of Isaiah in the New Testament. How do you deal with that? And so, I love, this is one of the things that lawyers will do. We love pointing out inconsistencies in other people because it's fun and it's kind of hard to deal with. And I think it's a big problem. So remember, some passages will talk about the first coming, the time of they lived, the first coming of Christ and the second coming of Christ, all in the same passage. And so admittedly, it gets a little bit tricky to look at all of these different prophetic scriptures. And is this been fulfilled or has it not been fulfilled? And then there is a verse in Corinthians that says, all of these things happened to the Jewish people, to Israel, for examples, so that you might not do the same thing. So what do we take from that passage? All the stuff that happened in the Old Testament, all the bad stuff, is also applicable to us in our walk in the church and with Christ and that type of thing. Now, it's the principles behind the passages. So, for example, I've done a sermon on Ezekiel 23. It's probably the passage I use most often, just because I really like the passage about Aholivah and Aholivah, the two whore sisters of Ezekiel chapter 23. Because some of those things, particularly prophetic scriptures, that's Ezekiel 23. Ezekiel was a prophet that wrote at the time of the captivity of the kingdom of Judah. Those prophecies seem to bear a lot of importance to things going on in the church. So when you look at the principles behind what they're talking about, Ezekiel talks about being faithful in your walk and obeying the Lord. In Ezekiel chapter 23, I think it has applicability to the church, particularly the church at the end of the age. And if you think we're in the church at the end of the age, then you ought to pay particular attention to those prophetic passages that relate to the fall of the kingdom of Judah, of which Ezekiel chapter 23 is one. So that's sort of how I approach it. That's just sort of a sidebar. Okay. So, and then we get into all these arguments like the seals and when they open and who they represent, and everybody's got their own interpretation. Like, for example, the one seal says the power over a quarter of the earth so that to kill with the sword. And so how does that get interpreted? Oh, that means a quarter of the earth gets killed by this rider, this fourth rider. And I don't think that's what it says. It says power over a quarter of the earth to kill with the sword. It means he has absolute power over a quarter of the earth. But so you'll see all the time, a quarter of the earth, there are 8 billion people, 2 billion people will die. And I like to, so that's possible. And by the way, I'm not saying that this is a picnic time or a recreational time or anything. This is a very serious time of human history. But if you say, well, how many people are going to be killed? How long does this seal take? Some say a year. Okay, so 2 billion people killed in a year. How many is that per day? And you come down to thousands per hour, 24/7, all around. And that's where I kind of look at the logistics. How does that happen and take place? Because it's something that we've not seen before. Now, look, there are a lot of different technologies developing that are pretty scary, and which, if within convenient, I just had the next slide here. We're having the Prophecy Roundtable on Wednesday at 7:30 Eastern. Patrick Wood, Scott Townsend, Britt Gillette, and Pete Garcia talking about technocracy, transhumanism, AI, and Mark of the Beast. And I will tell you that as we're sort of collecting things to talk about, we try to keep this to about 2.5 hours. And now we're sort of looking like, maybe we just need to have like a 24/7 technocracy roundtable channel, where we just kind of come and go and talk about what's happening today or yesterday. And I see some people back there going, yeah, hey, do that, yeah. But, we all have lives and everything. So that'll be Wednesday night. Pray for that, because some of the things that we're talking about are very scary. I mean, scary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at I'm trying to think where to start. So let's start with the thing that's probably of most immediate concern. Well, let's do this. Okay. So if you remember back on July 1st, up at Shiloh. Now, if you want to know where Shiloh is, Shiloh's about 30 miles north of Jerusalem. Shiloh. I mean, it's one of these things where no matter how you pronounce it, somebody will tell you you're pronouncing it incorrectly. But this is a location, very important historically, archaeologically, prophetically. This is where the tabernacle stood for 300, depending on how you look at it, 300 to 369 years, probably closer to 300 years. It's where Samuel heard the voice of the Lord, because he was serving in the tabernacle there. And they took the tabernacle that they had carried through the wilderness, and they came in and they set it at Shiloh. So this is the first political religious capital of Israel after the conquest. And so back on July 1st, there have been at least 5 red heifers that were sent. I'm pretty sure they came from the United States. And they made their way to Israel. And somebody says, so what? They put red cows in Israel. What's the big deal? Well, the deal is they want to build a temple. Now, and they believe, the people that are involved in building the temple, and by the way, one thing you need is you watch these things from Israel, and if you go on the Israel tour with us, one of the things we will hammer over and over again to you is we live at an incredibly unique time of prophetic historical history to show the ties of the Jewish people to the land. A lot of this evidence was lost, thought to not exist, and people didn't even think about it. And in our lifetimes, or a little bit back in the mid-1800s, they started to discover archaeological sites that proved the historicity and authenticity of the stories and things and locations in the Bible. And we see this all the time. Like, for example, they recently found a bulla, which is an impression of a seal. You remember the scene from Ben-Hur. where Charlton Heston, he takes the thing and he puts it on a wax seal and says, I've got the seal of whoever the guy was who had adopted him. And so sometimes that was done with a clay seal. They would seal it, and then they'd put it around a scroll. They found one recently that has names of people in the Old Testament. And where did they find that? So you will find, by the way, I will, when I have some time this afternoon, I'm going to put a link in the show notes. I posted this on my Facebook page the other day. Avi Abelo, who runs a website called Pulse of Israel, took a tour of the Temple Mount recently with Dr. Mordecai Kedar. Every one of you should watch the tour of Mordecai Kedar on the Temple Mount. And if you want we will try to convey all of that information to you on our tour of Israel this fall, but you should watch that. In fact, if you're involved in supporting Israel sites in Israel and the Temple Mount and that type of thing, you should go and memorize everything that Dr. Kedar told you about, all of his bullet points, because it's that good. And he talked about, so there are a couple things he talked about. First of all, over by, the pictures of the Temple Mount with the Eastern Gate, the closed gate. On the inside of that, inside the wall, and by the way, this wall was built back in the 1500s by a Turkish sultan, and it's built on top, so everything gets built on top of another, top of another, top of another. So on that Temple Mount, they have they don't know what to do with it. Many years ago, there was an earthquake, and during the earthquake, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the mosque at the south end of the Temple Mount, the roof collapsed. And when they went to repair the roof, they found these beams, like logs. And they said, well, there's not a lot of trees around here, so we'll preserve the logs. We may have a use for them later. So they put the logs over by that closed eastern gate under a tarp. At one point, Jewish archaeologists were able to get access to the site, and they went and they got pieces of those beams or two beams and took them and had them analyzed for age. Do you know this story? This was in Biblical Archaeology Review like 12 years ago. They found that one of the beams, was 7 of the 8 beams, were dated 2,000 years old. Now, what was going on the Temple Mount 2,000 years ago? There was a temple built by Herod. Jesus went there. And they're pretty sure those beams were part of the temple complex. One of the beams was dated 3,000 years old. But what was going on 3,000 years ago? Well, and by the way, the beams were cedars from Lebanon. They could analyze them and figure that out. 3,000 years ago, there was a guy named Solomon. Might have read about him. He was building a temple on the Temple Mount, and he used cedars from Lebanon. And so there, just laying under a tarp on the Temple Mount, there are these beams that probably are beams from the first and second temples. And then all the Muslims will say, well, there's never been a temple here, even though they've published this for years that this is where Solomon's temple was. So that's number one. Number two, how they got this seal was between the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Dome of the Rock is the gold dome building in the middle. The Muslims came in many years ago, and they brought in bulldozers. Now, if you've ever seen archaeologists work, when archaeologists dig and excavate, they use like a little paintbrush to brush the dust off. Muslims came into this area of the Temple Mount with bulldozers and carted away truckloads of dirt and debris. That was dumped over in the Kidron Valley, and so for decades now, for probably 20 years or more, they've had a Temple Mount a sifting project. They've been going through sifting through the dirt. And sifting through that dirt, they know where it came from, they know where it was. They found a seal from the first temple, from people associated with the first temple, just in the last week. And this is happening all over. It happens at Shem, it happens at Machpelah, in Hebron, it happens in Samaria. They keep finding more and more stuff. And they estimate right now, in terms of excavation of historical, biblical, archaeological sites, they've maybe hit 1% of sites. And there are books and academic articles like crazy written about this. So anyway, so they want to build the temple. One of the things in the temple is that people who are going to participate in the rituals in the temple have to be clean. One of the ways they do that is they burn a red heifer, they take the ashes, they mix it with water. You can read about it in Numbers 19. And by the way, the red heifer is a perfect picture of Jesus, and there's a lot of things. If you want, I'll put a link in the show notes. Be Alert Bible Prophecy in the News has a great article about the red heifer. So on July 1st, they burned a red heifer up at Shiloh. Now, the Temple Institute and all the Jewish people associated with this have come out and say, we don't have any red heifers that qualify to be burned to become the ashes of the red heifer to be mixed with water to use in the cleansing ceremony. But then a lot of Christians and others, they want this temple to be built because it shows where we are on God's prophetic time clock. So they said, well, that was the burning of the red heifer that needed to take place. I don't think it was, and I think some rather unwarranted claims have been made about the ashes from this particular ceremony. The ashes of the red heifer really needs to be burned on the Mount of Olives, overlooking the Temple Mount. Now, look, that's tradition, but the people are going to build it. That's where they say it should be done, and I think we need to respect that. And so this ashes of the red heifer don't cleanse you from sin. That's not the purpose of this. It's a ritual, cleansing ritual, and that type of thing. But so last week, Ben-Gvir, internal security minister from Israel, went up on the Temple Mount. I played you part of the clip from that. There were thousands, almost 4,000 Jews went up on the Temple Mount on Tish B'Av. They were singing up there. I showed you the picture of them singing the Israeli national anthem. I mean, this is something that really has not happened for a very, very long time. Ben-Gvir was singing and reciting scripture. There were prayers. There were people laying prostrate on the Temple Mount praying. And then I saw this video this week. So this is not a discussion for this temple in the sense that, look, Jesus Christ is the final complete sacrifice, okay? But we read Romans 11, and this is just some things I've been thinking about. We see that there is this process that takes place among the Jewish people in the end, where they're brought back. The natural branches are grafted back in again. And I keep thinking, like, well, what's the process? And what we've seen over the years is when the temple was destroyed, they lost just about everything. But now in our day and time, a lot of that is being restored. I don't think it's the final thing. You understand, it's part of the process that we're going to go through for Romans 11. That's my personal opinion. And you're free to disagree with that, but I just think that it's just so very strange. So like I saw, there's also a great video last week. Doron Spielman, who I interviewed, he wrote a book called When the Stones Speak, and Yishai Fleischer, a friend of mine, they went down to the city of David. And I think the title of the video, I'll put a link in the show notes, 50 feet under Jerusalem. They discovered the city of David, south of the Temple Mount, the original city of David. the palace and all this other stuff. And this has only happened in the last 20 years that they've been working down there. And we're hopeful that I hear that there is the pool of Siloam that we read about in Scripture is located there. I've been there. And then there is a road, Herodian stones, that Jesus would have walked on from the pool of Siloam to the Temple Mount. It's called the Pilgrimage Road. And I hear that it's supposed to open in September. And if it does, we actually have a tour scheduled on our tour down in the city of David, at least on the second part of the tour. So there is this desire to rebuild the temple. Okay, this is not a theological discussion. This is just actual facts that they want to do. And we know the Antichrist is going to misuse, desecrate, abomination. We know all that, okay? But understand, I think there is this process of things that they lost being restored to them. And the tabernacle pointed to who? Jesus. The sacrifices pointed to Jesus. So what should we prepare to do? Take what is being discovered and maybe rebuilt and point to Jesus, right? Is it that difficult? And maybe it is more difficult than I think, but anyway, so look at this. So this is a video that somebody put up last week about the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. I find it interesting. That's AI generated. By the way, the AI stuff that I'm seeing now, a lot of people in Hollywood or the film and TV, and they're like, they don't need us because, I mean, that's AI generated, and that's pretty good. Now, you can quibble about some of the exact accuracy of some of that, but did you see that they had the temple had opening and closing hours in that one part? You had the couple on the metro, on the light rail, taking lambs to the Temple Mount with the temple in the background. Do you understand that none of that happened since 70 AD? It never happened before because they didn't have video and film and pictures. And now it's happening at our time when there is this great dispute. So this is Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas came out yesterday and he said, we're going to, and look, all this is related to Bible prophecy because there's a big dispute about the land and who's entitled to the land. And it dominates a lot of the discourse in the world. Nobody in the Arab world cares about 1 million dead Syrians, 300,000 dead in Sudan, or 500,000 or 800,000 dead in Yemen. Do you see protests or marches or anything about that? No, but killing mostly male Hamas people in Gaza, the world is melting down on and turning that into against Israel, including, sadly, people on the right politically in the United States. Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Did I play Gaetz last week? Okay. It's even worse this week. He's going on anti-Semitic channels talking about, oh, we can't help Israel, we can't trust it. Israel, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Israel controls all of our foreign policy. No. There's a guy in charge right now in the United States. His name's Donald Trump. And you may have noticed that Trump has very strong opinions about things, and he kind of does what he wants. But under our system, the president controls foreign policy, and if he wants to do this or that, he's going to do it, whether you like it or not. But if your default position is that the Jews are controlling everything, here's how the equation works. If you say that, if you think that, you're an anti-Semite. Very, very simple equation. And you see it, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think she posted like 50 times on her social media this week about Israel and AIPAC. She has a problem. And the problem is that she's in office and she should be voted out. Because there's plenty of things that the United States gets out of its relationship with Israel, whether you like it or not. So Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, who is now in I believe the 20th year of the 4-year term he was elected to 20 years ago, he came out yesterday and said, I'm going to declare an independent state of Palestine at the UN this fall. And all these other people, Mark Carney from Canada, Keir Starmer from the UK, Emmanuel Macron from France, have all come out and said, we're going to recognize the state of Palestine in September. Why? Because, it makes perfect sense, right? We should reward Hamas with what they want. It's a complete capitulation of these people, and it just shows the terrible state of the leadership, and it has much end-time stuff. So here is Mahmoud Abbas in a relatively new Palestinian, they don't have a state. They've never had a state. It's a complete made-up fiction from 1964 by the Russians, Soviet Union. They created this people group called Palestinians, and now everybody acts like they've been around forever. They're the Canaanites. It's complete propaganda. And here is the Palestinian embassy in Tunisia, an Arab country. Remember, that's where the Arab country or Arab Spring kind of got kicked off when that guy burned himself to death. And what do you see there on the wall at the Palestinian embassy, Palestinian Authority embassy in Tunisia? It's Palestine, what they want to be, from the river to the sea. So, okay. Well, and you'll hear all these guys talk about, the thing. So right now, there's a big controversy in Israel. Gaza. What are we going to do with Gaza? Israel controls about 75% of Gaza. The 25% that they don't control is where about 75% of the population is. And it's a problem because Hamas is there. And I think I played Andrew Fox on trigonometry last week, where he talked about the fact this is incredibly difficult because Israel will go in, clean out an area, they'll leave. Hamas comes in and wires like every building or every other building. They got to go back. There are tunnel entrances. I forget how many thousands of tunnel entrances they've found or they suspect. And they have an extensive tunnel network. And I don't think that tunnel network, this is a representation of it, has yet been destroyed. And so now the question is, what are they going to do? So first I'm going to play it. So there's a lot of controversy about the aid and hunger and starvation. You see these images in Arab newspapers. Where did I see one just today. This is why I said this is less organized than usual, which is saying something. And Gaza's really destroyed. There was an editorial cartoon. Oh, here it is. Just today in one of the New Arab or Al Arabi newspapers. And the title of it is Starving in Gaza. And so what they did was somebody intentionally took a real picture that didn't represent starvation and turned it into this as an artistic thing. So that took some effort. So there's a lot of are they starving? Are they getting aid in? What's going on there? Mayan Hoffman from ILTV, I actually was communicating with her about a month ago about something, and I have a very long list of people that I want to interview because I think they're important voices. She actually went down to Gaza. What's going on? And so they did a segment on ILTV the other day. Hey, Mayam, what did you see in Gaza? And here's what she said.
So thank you. I came in here today because I wanted to see with my own eyes what is happening on the ground. I am in Gaza, on this Gaza side of the Kerem Shalom crossing. And what we have here are thousands and thousands of tons of humanitarian aid that is earmarked, that is slated for the people of Gaza. But it is sitting here in the boiling sun. Israel has enabled all of this aid to enter the Gaza Strip in order to help the people of Gaza. But once it enters this crossing or any of the others, the responsibility for the aid turns over to the international community, namely the United Nations. But still, you can see, and I'll take you around in just a moment and explain the situation. The aid is sitting here in the bolstering, burning, hot sun, getting ruined instead of getting to the people of Gaza.
I'm seeing an endless array of foodstuffs, personal items, milk for babies, mattresses for families, winter clothing, just sitting here and rotting under the Gaza sun, because of the so-called humanitarian agencies like the UN and other affiliated agencies simply refuse to distribute it to the people of Gaza. What is true is that the UN is in cahoots with Hamas. It refuses to distribute food. 9 out of 10 of every UN truck is looted by armed Gazans from Hamas and other terrorist organizations. We know that the drivers of UN trucks are members of the Hamas Union, so that Hamas knows where the trucks are going to be, what's on the trucks, where to loot them.
According to the most recently released COGAT data, on August 5th alone, more than 300 trucks entered Gaza. 300 trucks of aid were collected and distributed. More than 800 packages were delivered from 8 countries. 3 fuel tankers entered for humanitarian needs, and 110 aid pallets were airdropped. President Isaac Herzog, during a visit to Estonia yesterday, called on the international community to stop believing what he described as Hamas's falsehoods.
In the last 2 weeks, Israel has overhauled the entire approach to the humanitarian situation. 30,000 tons in the last week. 30 tons only by airdrops yesterday, let alone trucks. Almost 800 trucks the UN can distribute and is failing to distribute. But instead of that, we see a PR campaign like this one. This is from yesterday by German media. You see a photographer staging Gaza people to show that they are lacking food, whilst there's food there behind them. We ask the world not to fall into the lies, condemn Hamas, and say to Hamas, you want to move on? Get the hostages out.
Israel says it has done its part, opening crossings, approving merchants, and enabling aid. But on the Gaza side of the Kerem Shalom, the humanitarian crisis continues. Not from a lack of aid, but a failure to deliver it.
So that's ILTV's report on Gaza. So now there's a big controversy in Israel. What are we going to do with Gaza? Netanyahu has made a proposal, and people that I follow on social media, people that are on Call Me Back podcast with Dan Senor all the time, they say this is unlike anything they've ever seen in division in Israeli politics, this proposal about Gaza. And the proposal is, we're going to go in and take it over. I'm going to play you this morning, just from an hour or so ago, Netanyahu's news conference, part of it, with a link to the full thing. I'll put in the show notes later today. The IDF is opposing them. And the question is, what are we going to do? Are people, are they going to agree to anything? What's the public support for everything that's going on? And there are protests underway in Israel nightly about this. For example, here's a protest from last night. People marching, we got to stop the war, get the hostages. And that probably has support of about 75% of people in Israel. But the question is, are you going to get the hostages if you stop the war? This is Hamas. They have no interest in doing anything except playing this out and using this as a weapon, a way to weaponize Jew hatred, Israel hatred in the world. And guess what? It's working. I mean, this is unlike anything you've ever seen. A friend of mine in Israel the other night, friend. I've met her, talked to her. What's International Fellowship of Christian and Jews, Yael Eckstein. She posted on her social media last night, we're going on vacation. We can't say where because we're Jews and we're afraid. The other night, remember the thing in Spain on the plane? Remember we talked about the planes in Spain? Well, they kicked a bunch of Jewish students off of there a few weeks ago. Yesterday, a group of Jewish people on a plane in Spain got their meal, and on the package was written, Free Palestine. I'm telling you, this is unlike anything we have ever, at least those of us who were born after World War II, have seen anything like this. And it's everywhere. It's happening. So here's the article about a boss saying, I'm going to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian statehood at the UN General Assembly in New York. Now, listen, they acknowledge in the articles from Jerusalem Post the reported declaration is a symbolic step and was confirmed to the outlet by a Palestinian official. The move, according to the report, is predicated on a forthcoming constitutional declaration that would define the state's borders and foundations. Now, you would think when they've been pushing a two-state solution for all these years that they would have, like, borders. They don't. Now, they say we're going to go to the 67 borders from 1967, immediately after the war and everything, or before the war. But my contention is they should use the 67 borders, but from 967 BC, when Solomon ruled all of Israel, that would be, I'd be on board with those 67 borders. But they want to divide Jerusalem. And I had a friend, she was asking me questions like, where can I get a map? The Trump map had a division of Jerusalem, whether you like it or not. It was East Jerusalem. Some people say, well, it's not really Jerusalem. But when I was in Israel in 2017, Brian Schrager and I went down and we walked around the outside of the walls in Jerusalem. And by the way, that's a very difficult walk. Walking along the eastern side of the Temple Mount, I had to stop a few times because it's like this and like this. But the interesting thing was I had Google Maps on my phone. So this is 8 years ago. As we left through the dung gate to go around the outside of the wall, my Google Maps app was talking to me saying, hey, you're entering a foreign country. Do you really want to go to a foreign country? It's Israel, but do you see how the mindset is permeated everything that's not Israel on the outside of that wall? It's insane. So Mahmoud Abbas is going to do this, and so there's this we're going to determine the borders. Now, I don't think Israel's going to go along with it, but this plays into Bible prophecy a lot, and they're going to shove it down Israel's throat or not. So this morning, Netanyahu did a news conference just a little while ago in Jerusalem. Here is part of that news conference talking about Gaza. Now, this goes for about 30 minutes. Obviously, I'm not going to play all of it. You can go watch all of it, but let's watch a few minutes of this. Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel this morning.
Good afternoon. I'm glad you came here because I'd like to take the opportunity to puncture the lies and tell the truth. The truth.
And it would be great if he would do this a little earlier, before the update starts, so that I could edit it a little bit. So it's his fault that it goes on too long.
The truth is that Hamas still has thousands of armed terrorists in Gaza. It vows to repeat the savagery of the October 7th massacre and to do so again and again and again. It openly professes its goal to destroy the state of Israel. It subjugates Gazans, it steals their foods, it shoots them when they try to move to safe zones. And I think it's instructive that now many Gazans are fighting back. They're begging us, they're begging the world, free us, and free Gaza from Hamas. No nation can accept a genocidal terrorist organization, an organization committed to its annihilation, a stone's throw from its citizens. Our goal is not to occupy Gaza. Our goal is to free Gaza, free it from Hamas terrorists. The war can end tomorrow if Gaza, or rather if Hamas lays down its arms and releases all the remaining hostages. Gaza will be demilitarized. Israel will have overriding security responsibility. A security zone will be established on Gaza's border with Israel to prevent future terrorist incursions. A civilian administration will be established in Gaza that will seek to live in peace with Israel. That's our plan for the day after Hamas, and let me summarize it. 5 principles for concluding the war. 1, Hamas disarmed. 2nd, all hostages freed. 3rd, Gaza demilitarized. 4th, Israel has overriding security control. And 5, non-Israeli, peaceful civilian administration. By that I mean a civilian administration that doesn't educate its children for terror, doesn't pay terrorists, and doesn't launch terrorist attacks against Israel. That's what we want to see in Gaza. So it's neither Hamas nor the PA. That's our plan. Given Hamas's refusal to lay down its arms, Israel has no choice but to finish the job and complete the defeat of Hamas. Now, we've done a great deal. We have about 70 to 75% of Gaza under Israeli control, military control. But we have 2 remaining strongholds, okay? These are Gaza City and the central camps in the Muasi. That's roughly, it's schematically presented here, but it's fairly accurate. Last Thursday, Israel's Security Cabinet, instructed the IDF to dismantle the 2 remaining Hamas strongholds in Gaza City and the central camps. Contrary to false claims, this is the best way to end the war and the best way to end it speedily. We will do so by first enabling the civilian population to safely leave the combat areas to designated safe zones. In these safe zones, they'll be given ample food, water, and medical care, as we've done before. And again, contrary to false claims, our policy throughout the war has been to prevent a humanitarian crisis, while Hamas's policy has been to create it. Since the beginning of the war, Israel has let in close to 2 million tons of aid. I know of no other army that has enabled such aid to go to the civilian population in enemy territory. Now, if we had a starvation policy, no one in Gaza would have survived after 2 years of war. But our policy has been the exact opposite. We let in, as I said, almost 2 million tons of aid and sent millions of text messages, millions of phone calls to Gazans to get out of harm's way. Yet in the last few months, Hamas has violently looted the aid trucks meant to get to Palestinian civilians. They deliberately created a shortage of supply. And the UN consistently refused until recently to distribute the thousands of trucks that we led into Gaza through the Kerem Shalom crossing. So there are problems. We've had tons of uncollected food rotting on the Gazan side of the border because the UN was and still is unwilling to deliver all of it. Here are the tons and tons and tons of humanitarian aid that Israel let in to the Gazan side of the Kerem Shalom crossing. It's just sitting there because it's not distributed. So now we're going to go around this obstacle. We are going around it by doing three things. One, can I show this, please? Okay. Designating safe corridors for humanitarian aid distribution. No, that's showing the problem, not showing the solution, but here it is. First, designating rather safe corridors for aid distribution. You can drive trucks there and you'll be safe. Second, increasing the number of safe distribution points managed by the Gazan humanitarian foundations. And three, airdrops. That's airdrops done by the Israeli Air Force, and we're inviting others to join us. The result has been a humanitarian surge, which we're coordinating with President Trump and his team, and hundreds of trucks have gone in recent days. This is preventing hunger, but it's not prevented the global campaign of lies that we have all witnessed. So in Gaza, despite Hamas's obstacles, 2 million people are now getting access to humanitarian aid. But I'll tell you who isn't. The only ones that are being deliberately starved in Gaza are our hostages. This is Evyatar David. Look at his hand, at his arm. He's being deliberately starved by these Hamas monsters. And look at the Hamas captor. Look at the difference. He's eating, and he's eating well. The purpose of this news conference is to puncture the lies and spread the truth, but that distortion has been propelled around the earth, almost the way that the Jewish people were maligned in the Middle Ages. Every massacre of the Jewish people was preceded by massive vilification. We were said to be spreading vermin to Christian societies. We were said to be poisoning the wells. We were said to slaughter Christian children for their blood. And as these lies spread around the globe, they were followed by horrific massacres, pogroms, displacements, finally culminating in the worst massacre of them all, the Holocaust. Today, the Jewish state is being maligned in a similar way.
So you can watch that whole thing. Listen, he's in a very difficult position. The IDF opposes a lot of what he wants to do. And there was a new head of the IDF brought in recently, and there was hope that he was going to change things at the IDF, and it does not appear to be the case. The IDF is also under pressure from the legal system in Israel, including the Attorney General, who I believe the cabinet and Knesset voted to fire her, and the court said you can't fire her. Listen, if you think our politics is a mess, go to Israel and just watch, because it's, I don't even know if I would call it controlled chaos or insanity. It's hard to describe. And so this Attorney General will interpret Israeli law, or I think in some cases things that she makes up, or international laws to say that the IDF cannot do this or that, and hamstring the guys and make it difficult for them. And now it's to the point where, people in the world are picking up on this. They're saying Israel's evil, the soldiers are evil, and soldiers are being accosted, assaulted, even as they travel around the world. If somebody finds out you're an IDF soldier, so like I said, people that I know in Israel are saying they're not sure where they can go right now. Even New York, which has a large population of Jews, or Los Angeles, does not seem to be a safe place for them to go on vacation. And what's going to, no, I shouldn't say that. Well, I will say it. I mean, what's going to happen when Christian pastors lead a group to Israel and they come back? Are people going to go after them? Is a Candace Owens going to go after them? You better believe it, she will. Her stuff is so full of lies. By the way, she is sort of built sort of a little cottage industry claiming that Emmanuel Macron's wife was actually born a male. Actually was the father of Emmanuel Macron, and they're now married. It's very bizarre. I saw a libel expert the other day, an attorney, I can't remember his name, very respected in the libel slander community. And he said, based on what he knows, Candace Owens has a 0% chance of prevailing at trial. I hope that's so true. You know, bankrupt her. And yet she comes, well, I'm just trying to protect children. Yet she'll have on guys who, like Kanye West and the Tate brothers, that are just despicable, immoral human beings. It's insane. So anyway, so get this. So here's a tweet just this morning from Mikal Coulter-Wunsch saying she's Australian. After last weekend in Sydney, I showed you the pictures, 100,000 people marching against Israel and in Sydney and in favor of Hamas, not just against Israel, in favor of Hamas. Hundreds were arrested in London demonstrations supporting a prescribed terror group this weekend. It was called the Palestinian Action Group or something. The butcher, and here's what she says, listen to this. The Butcher of Tehran is featured as the right side of history in protests in Sydney, London, Toronto, and elsewhere. It's not just about the unleashing and normalization of ancient, ever-mutating, lethal anti-Semitism. It's about normalization of genocidal terror and tyranny intent to destroy our shared humanity and freedom, masked as justice and human rights they violently trample. A few months ago, Melanie Phillips released a let's see. Well, here's just a little before I get to her. Look, this is the cover of the current Economist magazine. Why Israel must hold itself to account. I can assure you, because I read The Economist, I subscribe to it, there has been no cover by The Economist saying Hamas must be held to account. Because it's the Jews, people. That's the problem. That's what The Economist says. It's what the governments of Europe say. It's what the UN largely says. And now MAGA in our country is saying, well, why do we care about what goes on over there? Because it's not over there. It's happening right on the streets of America today. Stop being silly people. That's the best thing you can say. You're blind to it. And look at the destruction. I mean, look, the destruction in Gaza is terrible. Look at these pictures. Let me zoom in. Look at the destruction. It's awful. Guess what? That's not Gaza. That's what Turkey has done over the last year or a little bit longer to dozens of places in Kurdish areas in Turkey and Syria. Look at the Turkish flags hanging in the one in the upper left-hand corner. That's Erdogan. These are not pictures of Gaza. These are pictures from Turkish-occupied Kurdistan. For years, the Turkish government has been indiscriminately bombing Kurds. Now this is from last year, about 10 months ago. By the way, have you seen protests about this? Have you seen UN resolutions or UN Security Council meetings to talk about this? No, no, no. Why? No Jews, no news. And this is the state of the world that we're in. This is just shocking. Here is, by the way, we'll talk about this at the technology roundtable. This is out of sequence, but that is a Grok generated AI image from the new Grok that was just released this week. New ChatGPT 5 just came out too. It says, in a romantic pre-Raphael light style, a tender moment unfolds between a handsome knight in gleaming silver armor and a beautiful woman in a flowing white gown adorned with flowers. And I would say, PM, that's like our first date, except I had a Chevy Nova instead of a horse, right? Anyway, so here's Linda Sarsour. Remember her? She's kind of resurfacing again because she's one of the main advisors to this lunatic who's running for mayor in New York. Here's what she said.
And yet, Israel's being accused of genocide. So what's going on?
I guess my video is not going to play. She says this. She's one of Mamdani's closest advisors, states how Muslims mustn't make the mistake of humanizing Israelis. Treat them as unhuman. Israel's home to half the world's Jewish population, and according to them, half the Jews in the world should not be viewed as human. That's what she says. All those Jews in Israel should not be viewed as human. Might be able to save the ones here in the United States. So Melanie Phillips did an interview with Johnny Anderson. This is about 5 minutes long. I don't have too much. Well, I have a lot after this, but we'll try to keep it to a reasonable amount. So she was interviewed, and she wrote a book about Christian and Jewish morality and that type of thing. I can't remember the name of it, but she was interviewed when that came out a couple months ago. And here's what she had to say about her analysis of why this is happening. This is very wise.
And yet, Israel's being accused of genocide. So what's going on here? Now, I think there are a number of things going on here. First of all, as I say, I think it's a deliberate propaganda ploy. But what it's playing on is something very dark in the Western mind, or I would say the Western liberal mind in particular. The Western liberal mind conceives of itself as being good because it's liberal. The Western liberal tells him or herself, I'm a good person because I'm liberal, and I'm liberal because I'm a good person, which means that I believe in things like the brotherhood of man, conscience and compassion, looking after the wretched of the world, the poor and the wretched of the world, standing up against abuses of power. These are all good things, and that's why I'm a liberal. And I'm a liberal because of all these good things. So, one of the expressions of my goodness and my liberalism is that I support the Palestinian Arabs who I think are an oppressed people, and they are oppressed by the Israelis who have taken their land away from them, and they are oppressing them. Now, every part of that, in my view, is a lie. But put that to one side. This is what the liberal progressive thinks. And the liberal progressive thinks that supporting the Palestinians is therefore something that makes the liberal progressive a good person. October 7 happened, and suddenly you have a situation in which the people that the liberal progressive has supported as being oppressed, and everything they do is a legitimate defense or resistance against oppression, suddenly we can see that those people have turned into the most bloodthirsty savages that could ever be imagined. Not just people who kill, but who slaughter in a sadistic, barbaric, debauched and depraved fashion that people can't imagine ever happening. They have slaughtered, raped, beheaded, tortured, burned alive babies, children, women, elderly men, and others. And as a result, the liberal progressives faced with this nightmare situation in which the people that they have supported as being oppressed are good people because they're victims are these savages. And the people they have represented as oppressors are the victims. They can't have that. Because if they have that, if they admit that that is the case, then their entire worldview is shattered, because the people, the cause they have supported as representing goodness is shown to be evil. And what does that make them? It makes them evil. So they can't have it. So what do? They go to extraordinary lengths to pretend that black is white, that justice is injustice, that oppression is resistance, and vice versa. So they have to represent the Israelis as being at fault. The Israelis are to blame for what's happened. So there is no better way of blaming people than accusing them of the very thing they are the victim of.
Projection.
So you accuse them of genocide. We hear it also regularly. The Israelis are accused of being Nazis. It's the same thing. It's not simply an offensive thing. It's a very deliberate thing, because if the Israelis are Nazis, then we are free. We, the liberal West, are free of any kind of guilt or any kind of association with bad things, because they are to blame. They are the people who are bad. And so we are free to continue with our fantasies of us being good people. And I think that's also what lay behind these amazing scenes that we saw on social media of people with their hands tearing down the posters of the hostages. Now you have to ask yourself, what's going through the mind of someone like that? These weren't posters advertising Israel. They weren't advertising the Israeli Defense Forces. They were pictures of babies, of children, of women who had been kidnapped by bloodthirsty monsters, by savage, depraved savages, and were being almost certainly subjected to untold horrors. And yet they were torn down, and the faces of the people tearing them down were contorted very often with rage and hate. And you have to ask yourself, what's going on in the mind of that person? And it seemed to me that they had to literally with their fingernails tear it out of sight. It was something that could not be tolerated to be in existence at all. The very concept of the Israeli babies and children as victims of the people they had been supporting, because it contradicted the narrative on which they had hung their own moral worth. And it seemed to me also they were tearing the Jews out, trying to tear the Jewish people completely out of their world, out of their sight, out of their world, out of their minds, out of their thoughts, and out of their consciences. That's to me what it represented. And this whole inversion of genocide thing is part of that. It is not just disgusting. It is not just ridiculous. It's evil. And I think it is a symptom of the evil paths into which the West has fallen through its embrace of a whole range of ideologies, a whole range of thinking, which I think has come to define what we call the liberal progressive West.
So excellent. I'll put a link to the full interview down below, and you can get her book. I think it's worth reading. And she's a very calm, rational person. I think she ignores the fact that this is demonic. I mean, these people are very large, often demon possessed. I've seen them. I mean, you can't explain it any other way. So a couple of things. Trump, the man of peace, as he's being called in a lot of different places, negotiated a peace agreement between Azerbaijan, the leader on the left, and Armenia on the right. They've been at war for centuries. There's a narrow corridor through there. It's going to be called the Trump Economic Development Corridor to connect things in Central Asia to Turkey and on to Europe. There's a bunch of competing economic corridors. We have the India, Saudi Arabia, Israel to Europe, Mediterranean one. We have some are trying to do a corridor through Iraq with railways to connect up to Turkey. And Turkey's like, we'll take them all. We'll get our cut off of everything that comes across our territory. So this took place at the White House the other day. It's not done yet because Armenia has certain things in their constitution where they define certain land as theirs, so they have to change their constitution before the final agreement can be signed. But listen, Trump's on a tear to get this done. He's going to meet Vladimir Putin in Alaska this week to talk about peace with Ukraine. Question is whether Ukraine's going to be invited or not. Ukraine's kind of saying, hey, if nothing comes out of there is going to apply to us. I don't know. That's a crazy thing. There's a new report out from Alma Research about what's going on in the north. My understanding from talking to somebody in Israel today, it's believed about 75% of the people that evacuated the north because of the Hezbollah problem and the potential rockets have returned to the north. Not sure about that, but this is an example of what's going on. So in northern Israel now, when we drove across the border, along the border, it was a fence. Now they're building a wall. And this is from a Hezbollah position in the south of Lebanon, what they painted on the wall. And what do they paint on the wall all the time? What is their goal? We want to take Al-Aqsa. That's the goal. And so there's a big controversy in Lebanon right now about what's going to happen. How is this, the government's trying to disarm Hezbollah. Hezbollah is saying, you're not going to do that. The leader came out and said, you're never going to you're never going to disarm us. And they had big protests in Lebanon the other night with Hezbollah supporters. It's a mess. It's a real mess. So the government in Lebanon appears to be trying to do this. We have this crazy guy who's doing it. But so I'll get to a Turkish report in just a moment. Here is from a news conference. By the way, I found this old editorial cartoon about Erdogan, because Erdogan has designs on the future, right? We've talked about that ad nauseum here. This sort of encapsulates it perfectly. The first step was prime minister, then president, and then sultan. And that's what Erdogan wants. By the way, his foreign minister at a news conference in Egypt this week said, let's see, I think I have, yeah.
Bununla mücadelemiz her türlü düzlemde devam edecek. Pes etmek yok.
Anyway, he goes on to say, listen, what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza is bloodthirsty and he deserves everything that he gets coming to him. This is the foreign minister of Turkey, who I'm sad to say our president says, well, Erdogan's a great guy. I got him under control. I don't know that you do. I don't know that you do. And this peace agreement, by the way, this is kind of an interesting, the Azerbaijan-Armenia peace agreement, this is front page of the Tehran Times the other day, Iran will act with or without Russia. That's the Tehran Times yesterday or today. And so there's a little bit of division that's going on between Russia and Iran right now. Iran doesn't feel that Russia's been supporting them enough. Earlier this week, there was a big article. I think I can put a link in the show notes. If not, contact me and I'll get you a link that may or may not work for you, from the Financial Times. And the article in the Financial Times was, you can see it says here, a covert trip by Iranian nuclear experts to Russia. August 4th, a year ago. Planes flew from Tehran to Russia. On that were Iranian nuclear experts. They were having meetings with Russia experts, and one of the things that they were trying to do was develop dual-use nuclear technology. In other words, Iran would have plausible deniability. Well, this is just civilian stuff. It has no military application at all. What are you worried about? And Russia was helping in that. But have you gathered that I'm not pro-Russian, by the way? I hope that's coming through. So this is Tehran Times. This is Cayenne. Yesterday, Iran. Oh, look at this. The Ayatollah. Iran is among few unwavering voices exposing the colonial essence of Israel. And then on the left, Lebanese rally in fury against plan to disarm Hezbollah. Turkey's involved in this. This is an article from about a month ago in a United Arab Emirates Arab language paper, and the guy says, title of the article, in Syria, it's easy to blame Israel. Al-Shara blames Israel for what's going on with the Druze and with the Alawites. That's Israel's fault. It's Israel. We know Israel's bad. Listen to Tucker Carlson. Listen to Candace Owens. They tell you that Israel is bad. We're just acting to undo the bad stuff. Ahmad al-Shara has no choice but to play the role, this is what he says, of a historical leader who leads the people, not follows them. Most importantly, the new Syrian president must demonstrate that he is Abu Muhammad Ahmad al-Shara, not al-Julani. In other words, fake who he is. Here's an interview with al-Shara in 2019. Back in the old days, here's what it says. Well, look what I found in my archive. This guy goes, Ahmad al-Shara, formerly known as Sheikh Abu Muhammad al-Julani, is in his al-Nusra ISIS HTS days, now the caretaker president of Syria, here speaking as if he is a Turkish intelligence agent about the Kurds in northeast Syria in 2019. Do you see the connections? What's sort of the pivot point of all this? It's the guy in Turkey. Okay, these areas in Kurdistan bombed incessantly. This is a report from July. Turkey has bombed Iraqi Kurdistan 18,235 times since the beginning of 2025. Have you been reading about this in the press? You haven't? Oh, I guess it's not getting covered, except, I mean, I'm telling you, you get a lot of information from X that you don't get elsewhere. So these pictures on the right are happening. Nobody talks about them. Let's see. So this is a report that comes from Turkish intelligence. So I was able to get a copy of this week. It's called The 12-Day War and Lessons for Turkey. It's about 60 pages long. I read through it, but here's the executive summary. I'm going to just look at this. I promise we will. Well, before I promise, I better check and make sure I don't have anything else. I have a lot more, but I will finish with this. So, and we'll talk more about this. By the way, I also try to link to you the Alma report about the North, because it's still a very fluid situation. Hezbollah is claiming they have rockets. By the way, Iran released probably propaganda videos the other day. They claim to now have an intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach the United States. And so when all the MAGA people are saying, well, there's nothing in this for us, there's plenty in this for us. And you better be glad Trump sent those B-2s to Iran and obliterated those things and set them back at least a while. So here's a 12-day war and lessons for Turkey, the executive summary. The war Israel launched against Iran on June 13th has shaken the regional equation. Now, this is Turkish perspective, Turkish defense people speaking. It's shaken the regional equation in many ways. And by the way, remember, Turkey is clearly part of this Ezekiel 38 thing. Now, I don't think we're there yet, but I'm just telling you, Israel came out with a big report at the end of December 31st, 2024, saying, hey, we really ought to be paying more attention to Turkey. They're kind of a problem. Now, Turkey looks at what Israel did and said, hey, we need to learn some lessons from this. And remember, the one principle that Turkey has followed recently is they have complete, I forget the exact term, I would say complete logistical dominance. They have set up their military so that their military can continue to operate and do what they need to do without relying on supplies from anybody. That's Turkey has designed their military to do that, because why would they do that? It seems like they're going to do some things in the future that they might get sanctioned for by the world. So they're going to say, we don't care. Okay, so Israel launched the war Israel launched against Iran on June 13th has shaken the regional equation in many ways. The military geopolitical process that began on October 7th has left a significant turning point, and this is a little bit awkward because it's translated, and demonstrated that the old strategies of actors like Israel and Iran have changed. The surprise raid tactic used by Israel in the war, the asymmetrical difference in military and intelligence technologies in Israel's favor, and the alliance support the country had caused Iran to emerge from the war with much greater damage. The war, above all, once demonstrated the importance of air power in intense and short-term conflicts, especially for countries without land borders. Lacking a military fleet comparable to Israel's modern air force, Iran has sought to redress the imbalance with ballistic missiles, especially hypersonic missiles, in which it has invested for many years. Talks about cyber attacks and electronic warfare. One of the most important factors in Israel's effectiveness in the war was the intelligence and operational network the country established within Iran. Key Iranian facilities, strategically important personnel such as commanders and nuclear scientists. And I'll bet this article in the Financial Times, if we followed up with a list of the scientists that were taken out by Israel, a lot of the guys that went to Russia, key Iranian facilities, strategically important personnel such as commanders and nuclear scientists were neutralized by in the Bible. So again, remember the principle. When you hear secular government enemies of Israel people speaking in apocalyptic, prophetic terms, pay attention because they're telling you, they're confirming what we know from the scriptures. And we're seeing this over and over and over again. So Turkey's at the center of this, and we'll link to that report. It's and the Houthis are releasing propaganda videos now saying they can reach Ben Gurion Airport. Now, I don't know if they can. Some missiles have landed by there recently, within the past few months. I don't know. Israel seems to handle these. There are red alerts all the time, every day at least, or it's every other day at least, of rockets coming from the Houthis or from Gaza even. Still coming from Gaza. It's a big deal. So pay attention to this guy. He has big plans for him or somebody who will follow him. Okay, so let's quit. Again, Prophecy Roundtable, Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. FBC, YouTube, Rumble, also be on my X and Telegram, maybe on Getter. I don't know. I'll have to see if I can figure that one out. And I'll get my staff working on it. The hundreds of people that we have working in the background. Well, I'll see if I can figure it out. That's what I said first. Was that, look, this is an incredible time to be alive. It is a lot of everything that we've been talking about for years coming to fruition. And so just be careful with your sources and what you glean onto. Don't advance the clock too far. Okay, so like I saw a lot of that with the red heifers this week. I was packing the glasses, and we were poor. We just had a set of glasses, maybe a couple extra ones, 4 glasses, and the box was full, right? And they're like Libby glass. So the box, I couldn't get the lid closed. So I'm a guy. What did I do? Push down on the box. Guess what happened? Crack, 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 crack. All of them broke. And 49 years has gone by and I still haven't heard the last of that one. So, but there's a method to my madness. Now when we have to pack, it's like, maybe you should just go play golf. So it works out for me. So who won in that situation? So anyway, look, watch what's going on. Plenty to go. I know I have some interviews this week, and I'll post those on my social media. So let's pray. Lord, thank you for your word. Lord, thank you so much for the blessing that you gave us by letting us know things to look for, signs to watch out for, to understand the things going on in the world. Lord, we pray that you will bring peace to Jerusalem, to protect Israel and the Jewish people and all the other innocent people that are caught up in these wars. Lord, we pray that you will bring your perfect plan to pass exactly as you've prophesied and to your glory. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.